Hello AP Gov students. This is a lecture just reviewing you very briefly on the political culture unit. That was unit 3. I'm not going to talk about this very much. I'm not going to explain things very much. I'm just going to go through the things you need to make sure that you know or review. Okay? If we look at the review sheet, it will remind us of the essential questions. How are American political beliefs formed? How are they formed in the first place? And second, how do they evolve over time? Because they do evolve. Next, how do political ideology and core values influence government policy making? Okay. Now, let's start out with American political culture. What is American political culture like? Well, first of all, we're a very diverse country, and that does have consequences for the government. It kind of has to be all things to all people in some ways. Okay. Despite all this diversity, we do share some core values. Those values include individualism, okay, the focus on individual rights and the individual's ability to pursue their dreams, okay. Second, let's go to the PowerPoint actually. Second is equality of opportunity. This does not mean we guarantee equality of outcome, but we do try or hope to guarantee equality of opportunity, and this is why many people still come to this country. Third, free enterprise. We are a capitalistic society and we believe in individual effort, okay, and rewarding individual effort. Fourth, the rule of law. Everybody should have to follow the law in this country. Everybody is bound to follow the law, including the president. Though that's interpreted differently over time, it's receiving a new interpretation today as I speak by Attorney General Bill Barr. And then the fifth core value is limited government. Okay, we don't want government to be any more involved in our lives than necessary. And this is true no matter which political party you are in this country. We don't think government should be involved just for the sake of being involved. We think private enterprise is a good thing. All right? Now, if we share these 5 core values, why is it that we have such different political views? Because we have different understandings of these core values, what they mean and how far they reach, and we also have placed different priorities on them. So for some of us, the equality of opportunity is more important, and for some of us, the rule of law is more important. That's one of the themes we have in this country is and individualism too comes into play here, because one of the things we have in this country is this constant need to balance our desire for individual protections versus our desire for law and order. Okay. Okay, so next we need to talk about, oh, by the way, political culture. I don't know whether I gave you this definition, but let me just give it to you again, if I did. Political culture is the values and the attitudes and the beliefs that we have about political matters in this country. Okay? What kinds of attitudes we have, what kind of values like individualism do we have, and what kinds of beliefs do we have. That's what culture is in sociology, and political culture is obviously those things with reference to our political thought lives, okay, and action lives too. Okay, now political socialization is a process by which you learn these attitudes and beliefs and values. Okay, how do you acquire your political views? Now there are several sources that you have for this. You can probably remember what they are. Your family is a source of your political ideas. A lot of you still share many of your political family's ideas. Your school, your friends, your church, all those things can be sources of political socialization. Okay? Now, which one is most important? Your family is. If you want to predict what somebody's politics are going to be like when they grow up, their family is probably the best place to look. Don't forget, by the way, that media is also an important source of political socialization. I shouldn't leave that off the list. Now, there are other influences on us politically. Major political events, things like Trump's election and Trump's administration, that is a significant thing distinctive thing in our political life. And you will probably always remember that that was going on during your senior year of high school, right? Globalization, the fact that the world is becoming a smaller place and that we can interact with each other very easily and immediately, almost all over the world, pretty much, right? And then there are what we call generational and life cycle effects. Generational means what generation are you considered to be in? I'm a baby boomer. I forget what we call you guys, Gen Zers or Gen Xers? Maybe you're Gen Xers. Okay, I can't keep track of anything after me. But that's what your generation has to do. Generation, of course, reflects the events that have occurred in your life and the experiences that you've had, along with the other members of your generation. Now, life cycle has to do with what point in your life you are. So many people, for example, get more conservative as they age. That's been true in the past. I'm not sure that will continue to be true, but that has been to some extent true. Now, why would that be? Because you get more money when you get older, and that tends to make you more conservative. Okay? So those are some other effects on your political socialization. Now, when we talk about political culture, we need to talk about polling. Okay? And when we talk about polling, we are talking about something used by politicians not to tell them what to think, but to shape the presentation that they make to people, how to frame things. All right? Now, what do you need in a public opinion poll? Actually, something screwy happened. Okay, so we will go back. And I will do something different. Give me just a second, people. I'm still alive back here. Okay, so as I said, they are designed to make sure that that you can frame your presentation as a candidate. All right. Now, what do you need for a public opinion poll? Well, you need, of course, you need random sampling. Okay, you need a random sample of people. You don't want to have to survey everybody, so you want to survey a group of people that adequately represents the population at large. Okay, that's what a random sample is. Right. Now, your sampling error is the margin of error, of course, when you do a poll. It could be something like plus or minus 3%, and that tells you that whatever number you end up with has a possible error of 3 points more and to 3 points less. Okay, that's a 6-point range. That's quite a bit. All right. Now, how do you reduce your sampling error? By increasing your sample size. All right, your random sample size. Okay. Now, what else do you have to do to make sure that your polls are reliable? You need clear and unbiased questions. You need to be really careful about this because it's very difficult to ask clear and unbiased questions. So if they ask you like an FRQ about a public opinion poll, one of the things you need to look at is how the questions look. Okay? Sorry. Having trouble with my PowerPoint. There's something freaky happening with it. Okay, now what about the types of polls? Okay. The types of polls include first a benchmark poll. A benchmark poll is a poll that's usually taken at the beginning of a campaign to figure out where exactly you stand at the beginning and to measure yourself against as you go through the campaign. Okay. Now, how do you conduct the measuring? Well, you do polls that you conduct later on that, what are they called? They're called tracking polls, okay? And you take tracking polls periodically and you measure those against both your original benchmark poll as well as prior tracking polls, right? The third kind of poll is an entrance poll. You take it when people go into the polls before they go in to vote. An exit poll is taken after people come out of voting. Exit polls are used commonly to try to predict what the election result will be even before the votes are counted. That's how the media makes predictions on election night, is by using exit polls. Okay. Now remember that polls can be taken in different ways. They can be phone polls. They can be internet polls. Once upon a time they were done in writing, but political polls aren't usually done that way. Okay. Now, one of the things that you need to be able to do for the College Board is that you need to be able to explain the quality and credibility of the claims based on public opinion data. And like we've said, you look at the quality of the questions, you look at whether the sample is random and how large that is, what the sampling error is. All right. Now, the impact of polls on the election depends on different things. For one thing, it depends upon how important society thinks opinion polls are at that point in time. Right now, we think they're pretty important. Okay. On the other hand, we have so many of them that any individual one may not be that big a deal. Okay. The other thing that affects how much polls impact elections and policy debates is how reliable we think they are. Are they accurate? Okay. And once again, to figure that out, we look at the sampling of and the technique used to conduct the polls. Okay. Now, one thing that sometimes happens with polls, first of all, actually this doesn't sometimes happen. It always happens pretty much nowadays. Is that polls get treated as really, really important in presidential races, and we talk about the media as doing horse race journalism. Okay, because it's focusing so much on the polls and who's leading, who's following, without really focusing on the policy issues. The other thing that can happen with polls is called the bandwagon effect. Okay, a lot of people like to go with the winner. Okay, and if they see somebody who's winning at a poll, they may decide to vote for them basically because they're winning at a poll. Okay. Now, we need to talk about political ideology. Okay, ideology is, where'd I go? Okay, having a lot of trouble with this. Okay, so when we talk about U.S. political culture and how it influences public policy, usually people have different points of view that they use to approach policy. Okay, one of the things that we have in this country is we all share the view that we're a democracy, even though we're in a diverse society. The public policies that do get generated at any given time reflect the attitudes and beliefs of citizens who choose to participate in politics. So if you do not participate in politics, your views do not get reflected in elections and policy debates. All right? That's the problem with youth not voting. If you don't vote, people don't care what you think. Okay? And we also need to remember that in our political culture, as I was saying before, we are fundamentally about balancing our individual liberty, okay, very important to us, against the need for law and order, which is also very important to us, safety and security. Okay? Now, who are Americans ideologically? Okay? How do they identify themselves? Well, a little bit more than a third of them say they're conservative. Okay? About 24% or so of them say they are liberal. But that difference that between 33 and 24 is growing smaller over time. Where are most people going who are leaving the conservatives? They're becoming independents. And independents is the largest growing, the fastest growing group. Okay? And that tells us that we are, as we know, in a de-alignment because people are abandoning political parties. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Let's see if we can get this up. Good. All right. So remember this is an important slide. You need to know basically where different groups of Americans fall on the ideology spectrum in this country. For example, African Americans and Hispanics are more liberal than whites. Women's tend to be not necessarily more liberal. They might not say they are more liberal, but they are more likely to vote for the Democratic candidate. Okay? Jews are the most liberal among the major religions. All right? Christians are a mixed bag. The evangelical Christians born-again Christians are very conservative and Catholics are mixed, so you can't really say they fall one way or the other. Okay. Young people are more liberal than older people, even though they don't vote as much. And people in the South are more conservative. People in the West and North are more liberal, and in the Midwest, they are kind of in between. You find a mixed bag there. Okay. Now, I hate this slideshow because it's giving me problems. So, the other thing you need to know in this unit is what people who share a given ideology tend to think about certain topics in politics and government. So the first topic we're going to talk about is economic regulation, whether the government should get involved in the economy, in the market, if ever, okay? Now, this relates a lot to the monetary policies that we talked about in econ, okay, the Federal Reserve and that kind of thing. Liberal people think that government regulation can be good, okay? And so they favor more of that in the marketplace because they think that the Keynesian theory that says that if you have problems in your economy, then you might need to pump a little money into it, and they believe that that's a good thing to do, like in the New Deal, okay? Second, libertarians want as little regulation, government regulation as possible, okay? Protect their property rights, got to protect those, and trade and basically protect individual rights when we get to the social side, but that's what they want, okay? Otherwise, leave everybody alone, all right? Now, conservatives are in between the two. They want as little regulation by the government as possible, but they're not quite as extreme as the libertarians, okay? I'm sorry that was in a black space. Really sorry about that. I hope you enjoyed the audio, okay? Now, the other thing we need to talk about is how do ideologies generally address social issues, okay, and the role of government in addressing social issues. So liberals think that government should guarantee personal privacy, okay, that they should not intrude into personal privacy. Generally speaking, conservatives are less concerned about that. They're more concerned about the law and order side, except if you're talking about religious freedom, okay, or educational freedom. For example, their ability to send their children to private schools, okay. Now, conservatives want less government involvement in social issues. They want less government involvement in things like affirmative action, okay? They don't think the government should be involved in trying to ensure social and economic equality, all right? They don't like the entitlements, the welfare programs, right? And the libertarians, of course, are even less fond of those. As we said, they think that we should protect private property as a government and individual liberty, and that's it. Now, who wins these battles about what approach we should be taking? It depends on who's winning the election, who's succeeding in the parties, and who's succeeding in elections. Okay? Now, people vote for different reasons. I mean, as we know, they also are different kinds of voters. Okay? So there are some people who are what we might call ideologues, and they vote based on their particular political viewpoint. If they're conservative, they're always going to vote for the conservative viewpoint, okay? And they connect their views with that viewpoint. There are some people who vote based on group benefits. What is their vote? How is their vote going to affect groups they like or dislike? Okay, could be their own group, but it could also be a group they dislike. Voters who vote based on the nature of the times, in other words, how good is the economy doing, which a lot of voters do, that's what they're thinking about. Is life good for them or is life bad for them? Okay? And finally, there are voters who basically, they might vote for a party just because, they've always been in the party, or they might vote based on personality too. But these are what we call no issue content voters. Okay, so they don't care about the issues. All right? Now, I think that's it, and I will talk to you later about the next subject.